Hey guys, welcome back to another ADSR and massive synth tutorial. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can at youtube.com/ADSR tuts. So that was a demo of the sound we're going to be making today. It's kind of, it's kind of like a creepy synth. I wouldn't call it a lead or a pad because it's a little too aggressive for a pad, but it would work really well in like a dubstep section, maybe like the intro or the breakdown where there's vocals. It would work with a lot of other genres too. Even get it in some film score if you do away with the dubstep drums that I had in there and maybe went to like a epic tom type feel. So this is the sound, soloing it. And that's all in massive. There's no external processing on that. This is just I was playing like a little blip lead using the exact same sound. I just have some sidechain compression on it. So, I mean, that's the exact same sound. I have the MIDI up there, but you can see those notes up high. That's the little lead blip, but I just muted it in this track so I could control how loud it was in the context of everything. So let's make another massive track real quick. And I will make a new sound. There's the default sound in massive, and now we're going to jump right in. So here's what it sounds like. Not very cool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the M-Talk oscillator. I'm going to grab that waveform. And that's the modern talking. And I'm going to keep it on spectrum. I'm going to keep the wavetable position all the way up, intensity all the way up, the amp all the way up, and the filter, the F1 and F2, which is telling it how much it's sending to your filter 1 or filter 2, depending on which one you have activated. Keep that in the middle. Only thing we're going to do is tune it up to positive 12. So now we have this. So moving on to oscillator 2. I'm going to activate it, and I'm going to take the vulgar waveform. I'm going to leave it on spectrum, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to tune it up to positive 12, and we're going to keep the wavetable position, the intensity, and the amp all the way up, and we're going to leave the F1, F2 filter slider where it's at. Now moving on to the third oscillator, we're going to keep it on square saw 1, and we're going to keep it on spectrum, and we're going to pitch this down to negative 12 to kind of beef up the low end of the sound a little, because the vulgar and M-Talk, they're kind of hollow sounding they're kind of hollow sounding wavetables. And I'm going to take the wavetable position down to around halfway, and then maybe take the intensity down just a pinch. Now we should have this sound. Okay, gonna turn it up to serial. And for our filter 1, we're only gonna use one filter for this. We're going to take the daft filter type, and we're gonna leave the cutoff pretty much where it's at, because we're going to modulate that with an envelope, and we're going to take the resonance down just about to 0. So we're going to have an envelope kind of modulate that cutoff for us. Now let's go down to the noise oscillator real quick and turn that to bright, and then maybe up just a little bit under halfway. And we're going to take on insert 1, we get massive actually in the middle of the screen here, so you can see what's going on. We're going to take the clip, the hard clipper, and we're going to keep the dry wet down a little bit and keep the drive where it's at, or maybe a little bit higher if you want a more intense sound. I just turned it up a little. And then let's get the reverb on. And you guys have probably noticed that I like having my effects and inserts set up before I start editing too much of the sound with the envelopes or the LFOs or things. Just my way of hearing things, how I kind of want to hear them in a mixed environment. So gonna keep the reverb dry wet about halfway size. Maybe just push that up a little bit, the density up a little, and I think I'm gonna keep color where it's at. And now I'm going to activate the synced delay, and then we're going to, for the left channel, we're going to have 4:16, and the right channel 4:16 as well for the ratio. And then the feedback, let's turn that up a little, because those aren't really going to be too intense, especially at a 4:16 ratio. So if I just play a note, even with a fairly high dry wet setting, but I'm actually going to turn that down a little and turn the damp up. And now we should have this sound. So going to activate the EQ, and I'm going to turn down the low shelf a little and then turn down the boost. Because if I had more sounds in this song, I'd most likely have some type of bass instrument here, especially if it was a dubstep or even a cinematic. There would be something there, so I want to cut out a little bit of the low end to plan ahead for the mix stage. And then for the high shelf, I'm going to turn that up a little to taste. So now it's kind of sounding like, almost like an organ sound, maybe. Kind of a creepy sounding one though. So now let's go to our voicing tab. Our voicing tab, and we're going to turn the unison up to 4 to add more thickness to the sound. Keep it on polyphonic and always, and then we can keep all these off. I'm going to look at the routing real quick and make sure that's all good. Okay, good. Going on to the oscillator tab, we're going to keep the restart via gate off and the glide time where it is, and then we're also going to turn the brightness on my screen, and we're also going to take, we're just going to do this now, we're going to take our first envelope and we're going to modulate the depth and the rate that was already set to default on the vibrato, and just leave that with modulating with envelope 1. And now let's actually create the proper envelope for our first one. So we're going to turn the attack all the way to the right, leave the level all the way to the right, leave the decay in the middle, and then turn the level all the way up. And then you don't have to touch the S-slope and morph, and then we're going to keep the release where it's at. So you got this kind of arching sound, and that's going to be modulating our vibrato. You can hear it kick in towards the end of the chord, so listen. It starts to activate there, and you can play with the depth. You can turn it up a little. Moving on to envelope 2, which is what I used in the original preset to modulate the cutoff. We are going to turn the attack almost all the way up, probably around 75-80%. Turn the level down a little so you don't get too loud of a sound as it builds up and you're not clipping as it gets to the highest amplitude. And then keep the decay where it is and turn the level down a little. So you should have this slow slanting upward and then a little bit of a down. And we're going to turn the release up a good amount, maybe a quarter of the way. And now we're going to take that envelope and we're going to modulate the end of our cutoff for filter 1. And that's sounding pretty close to the sound we had. Now let's just go on to envelope 4 and dial in the right settings. So for the attack, turn it all the way down. Keep the level all the way up. The decay, we're going to slide to the right a little and turn the level down just slightly. and then turn the release up a little. The reason we're doing that is because by default, the fourth envelope is kind of set up to the amp. I don't know why I said amp like that. The amp of massive, and I wanted a little bit more release on that, so it keeps a little bit of volume going into my chord changes. And now we're also going to modulate the dry wet of our hard clipper we stuck on our first insert to kind of warm up the sound as it gets to this point in the envelope. I'm also going to take that and modulate the amp of our noise, because you wouldn't want a bunch. I'll mute this real quick and just crank up the amp. You're not going to want a bunch of with a evolving kind of sound like this. It kind of puts all your cards on the table too quickly if you have a bunch of like a bright or a white noise right at the beginning. So I'm going to modulate that. So what's happening is, as the sound plays, it's going to kick in conjunction with this envelope and add a little bit more bright noise. And I'm also going to do something similar that we did with the vibrato. I'm going to do that with an LFO. So I'm going to take my fifth LFO here, and I can just keep it on. You can choose really any shape you want. Let's do Chinese roof, and I'm going to drag that to the right so it's kind of doing the same shape roughly as the envelope. It's swooping up and then down on the release. I've never used Chinese roof before, so this will be interesting. I'm going to turn the rate up a good amount. I'm going to try syncing it. And I'm going to take that LFO, and I'm actually going to activate the amp with it. Let's turn the amp all the way down, and we're going to take our first envelope and control the amp. So right now, if I just turn this off real quick, it still sounds the same. So it's not going to do anything. We're going to have to assign that LFO to a destination here. I'm going to assign it to the cutoff and just turn it up just a little bit. So right now, if I turn the amp up and play it, we should hear a change. You hear that percussive sound going. I like that. I like that Chinese roof one too. So I didn't do this in the original preset, so this is kind of improv here. So I'm going to boost this up a considerable amount, and then, because I can barely hear it if it's just on, but I don't want it coming in at the beginning of the sound. I want it coming in as the sound starts to open up. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our amp down here, and then I'm going to reactivate our first envelope, and I'm going to modulate the amp all the way up. So the LFO will start going as we hear this envelope rising with how we've created that. So I'm turning up the amp a little bit more. I like that. I think it sounds cool. Just to hear it, I'm going to take the second envelope and try that instead of our first envelope. I also added a little bit of that LFO we created to the size on our reverb in the FX1 slot. And so that's basically it. I like how it turned out. I like that last second LFO change I did with the Chinese roof and activating it with the amp of one of our envelopes. So here's the final sound, and I'm going to unmute this little blip lead, which is the exact same preset as this, just with a sidechain compression on. So let's play it all together. Sounds pretty cool. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions or comments, just let me know and I'll try to get back to them as soon as possible. And if you haven't gone over to massivesynth.com, definitely do that. Check that out. Tons of great presets and a bunch of tutorials that we put out weekly. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.